Welcome to the Voice of All Things. Recently, we posted a video detailing all of the evidence Oda has left that leads us to believe that Trafalgar Law, of all people, will join the Straw Hat Pirates. Now, obviously, this video was met with some objections, both of the civil and uncivil variety. And honestly, some of these counter-arguments are actually quite damaging to our case. Or are they? Let's take a close look at the evidence that was presented by the fans against Law joining the crew, and see if it holds up to any scrutiny. Before we begin though, please watch our last video if you haven't seen it yet, because we'll be using that as a foundation for a lot of the things we talk about. First and foremost, one of the most frequently seen arguments against Law joining the crew is, and I quote, "I don't really like him." Now, do I really have to tell you why that's not a valid argument? Well, I'll tell you why anyway. You see, believe it or not, that isn't a totally invalid complaint. Characters that join the crew should be likable. Characters that Oda has written in such a way that we should want to see more of them. So has he succeeded with Trafalgar Law? Oh, well, I guess that answers that question. You see, not everyone is going to like every character, but the fans at large, well, they love Trafalgar Law. Now, I'm not sure if everyone who's reading One Piece back in the East Blue days wanted the original four to join, mostly because, well, there wasn't an internet back then. But personally, I became a One Piece fan around the time of Enies Lobby, and let me tell you, online there was a lot of people who wanted Paulie to join and did not want Frankie to join. And oh boy, you would not believe how many people didn't want Jinbei to join for some reason. So this shows that personal preference is not a factor in a crew member joining, especially when we are talking about someone as beloved as Law. On a side note, to be clear, I was accused of being a Law fanboy on our last video, but that is absolutely not true. In fact, when the Supernovas were originally introduced, he was probably my least favorite. Of course, now I like him a lot more, especially ever since the events addressed Rosa, when I began to realize that, hey, this guy isn't meant to be a rival, he's meant to be a member of the Straw Hats. Now, I think the topic of rivals and the other supernovas is one that we have to address while we're on the subject, as that is a topic of much discontent. A lot of people seem to be under the misconception that these 9 folks we met way back when are destined to continue as rivals to Luffy until the story's conclusion and perhaps even beyond. But this story is not My Hero Academia, which I do like, by the way. The protagonist's goals in One Piece is not to elevate his peers to greatness. That's Deku's goal in My Hero, and that is why characters like Bakugo and Ida aren't going to get left behind by Deku as he climbs up to the top. He's bringing them with him. But Luffy's goal is to be king over these people. The point of the story and the characters in it is way different. Not all of the 11 supernovas are meant to follow Luffy to the top. For example, Drake. Drake, spoilers by the way, is just a marine. He's not Luffy's rival at all. Bonnie, she got put down even before the time skip even happened. And now she's off doing something completely unrelated. And Apu and Hawkins not only got dominated by one of the Yonko already, but they both got absolutely destroyed by Zoro. Now, I know some would debate that Law is nothing like the ones I listed, and I agree. But the point of all of that was that the supernovas aren't meant to be a group Luffy is supposed to rise to the top with. They are like the Warlords or the Yonko. They are a group he's supposed to have to surpass on the way to the top. Remember, this group wasn't planned from the beginning of the story. They aren't essential narratively. Oda came up with them on a whim to add more flavor to the world, and quite brilliantly, might I add. So, going back to the point of the video, some people pointed out that the fact that Oda did not plan for Law from the beginning is a major blow to the theory of him joining the crew. But is it? Well, Oda did quite kindly publish his original sketchbook for the crew, and it looks quite different from the one he has now. Of course, the initial 5 are virtually unchanged from his original plan, but 2 of the characters are merged into one, that is Frankie. And Jinbei, Chopper, and Brook look way different. And hey, Robin's missing completely. Robin joining the crew was clearly an addition that Oda had creatively at some point along the way. And honestly, it feels like the direction he is taking Law is quite similar if you think about it carefully. Now, before I get into the actual legitimate arguments that were presented against the theory of Law joining, I must address a few of the other things people kept saying. Quoting chapter 1000, Luffy will be the one to become Pirate King, which means he will find Laugh Tale first. Also, Law does not want to be Pirate King, as many seem to believe. He has never vocalized this desire. In fact, he has stated time and time again that he wants completely different things. Also, him joining the crew would not make him less of a man, as many people seem to believe. Jinbei just told us that being a Straw Hat is a much more valuable title than Warlord, a title which Law also once had. Also, yes, Law does have an adventure he wants to go on, but it would be dumb for Law to split from Luffy to go on it, because his destination and Luffy's destination is exactly the same. I don't know why everyone keeps saying Law has his own adventures to go on after chapter 996. Join the crew or not, him and Luffy are going to the same place, and he's going to need Robin once he gets there. Now, in the defense of the people who said some of these things, all of this info was from brand new chapters that were given to us very recently, so they might not be caught up, but it's all there. Now onto the legitimate arguments. What if Oden's logbook contains the explanation of the Will of D? A lot of people have guessed that that's what we're going to find out in the next few chapters. Well, honestly, that would destroy this whole theory, yes. But when we had Oden's flashback, all we saw him write down is that you learn about the fated letter at that place. Of course, we may have to wait until Yamato gives us a peek inside that book. But when we do finally get to see that book, one of two things will happen. One, Law attains his goal and finds out what the D is, and then he'll have to find a new goal again. Or two, Law realizes that he will need to follow the Pirate King to the end of the world, and my theory gets a huge boost. Only time will tell. If that second possibility is true, this could be the moment Law officially asks Luffy to take him along for the rest of the journey. After all, their alliance had the stated purpose of taking down Kaido, so once that deed is done, we are going to need to get a moment of these two reaffirming their bond for the rest of the story. Now, let's talk about what I think are the 4 potential detractors from the theory of Law joining the crew, because there are still 4 serious holdups that may prevent him from joining. However, I have good reason to firmly believe that each of these hurdles will be overcome, and I'm going to explain why. First of all, there was a recent SBS where Oda mentioned that Luffy doesn't use nicknames for crew members, but commonly does for people he doesn't hold quite as dear. For instance, he calls Yamato Yamao or something. Now, he does do the same with Traffy, calling him, well, Traffy, or Tragai, or Torao, depending on who is translating. Does that bar Law from the crew? Well, no. All we need is one panel of Luffy finally calling him Law, and bam, it is a really easy fix. Now, on that topic, I have one thing to say. We all really respect Oda, but he does make mistakes. He once said that Whitebeard doesn't have women on his crew, in a similar out-of-story context as when he said that Luffy calls his crew members by their names. But in the flashback, what do we see? Whitey Bay chilling on his ship. That's right, when Oda says something out of the actual story canon, we can't expect him to remember it 100% of the time. Didn't he also say that he never draws Luffy with thought bubbles? Well, go back and read Impel Down. My point, Luffy will probably call Law by his name if he joins, but he may not, even if he does join. All this being considered, this really does not exclude Law from joining the crew. Secondly, what will be Law's role in the crew? I feel like a lot of people ignored what I said about that in the last video. We didn't know Jinbei's role, even though he was a shoo-in for joining. Usopp's role wasn't clear when he first joined either. He kept saying he was going to be the captain. Robin's role is something ships don't even need. Did you think they would need an archaeologist on the ship? Me neither, but Oda made it work. I actually like what a lot of people said in my last video. Law could serve as a strategist for the crew. While Luffy really isn't the type of guy to need a strategy, the crew might need one if they're facing off against smarter opponents like Akainu and Blackbeard. The upcoming enemies are schemers, and Luffy could really use some help in that department. Of course, that's just one possibility. What I think a lot of people are actually saying when they wonder what his role will be isn't, what could he be, but rather, will he replace someone? I think a lot of people were worried about him upsetting the monster trio because he's just too OP. But a lot of people worried about that with Jinbei too, didn't they? And things seem to have found their equilibrium since then. If you're worried about Law overshadowing Zoro, I want you to stop and think for a second. Now, I'm by no means a Zoro fanboy. I'm Team Sanji. But do you really think that Law is stronger than Zoro with all of the absolutely nuts things that Zoro has been doing lately? I just don't believe it. I don't want to be a power scaler, but look at the facts. Now, of course, do we have any way to compare these two directly? Not yet, but we will in the upcoming battle when they're fighting side by side against Kaido and Big Mom. Now, how about overshadowing Chopper, the Doctor? I think that's a bigger concern for a lot of people, because Chopper is not strong. Chopper's role in the ship is not that of a serious combatant. He is the Doctor, and if Law is better than him at that, what purpose does Chopper have on the crew? Well, as I mentioned in my last video, when we got a second swordsman on the crew, Zoro had to prove he was stronger, and he did, by literally beating a stronger Brook clone. Now, I don't know how Oda will do this with a more nebulous feat like doctoring, but Oda has set up a scenario in the past that was designed to compare the skills of an old Straw Hat with a new one, and he can do it again, and perhaps he already has something in mind. We just need to trust Oda on this one. Thirdly, despite what I said in the last video, a lot of people still got held up on the fact that Law has a crew of his own, and honestly, I can see why. His attachment to these people is a little different than some of the other crew leaders that have left their mates to join Luffy. This is a crew he founded and put together himself. They are very close to him, I still think it's adorable how he uses Bepo as a pillar. Before we talk about things from Law's point of view, someone mentioned last time that Luffy has never invited someone who has their own Jolly Roger to the crew. But guys, Luffy already invited Law to the crew. From Luffy's standpoint, Law can join whenever he wants. The only thing standing in the way of Law joining the crew is his crew, and of course the final point I'm going to make in this video. Law clearly cares about these people, his crewmates. No doubt. But remember, he left them behind on Zhao when he went to infiltrate Dolphy's organization. He does care about them. He cares about them enough to realize that they are way too weak to follow him into dangerous situations. I mean, of the strongest members of his crew, only 2 of them could resist the Conqueror's Haki blast back on Sabaody Archipelago. They are, and I know I hate to say it, fodder, and Law knows this. Now, that doesn't mean he loves them less, and if anything, this arc has proven how much these beloved friends of Law are a liability when confronted with true strength. So here's the thing, Law knows he has to get to the end of the world to fulfill his dream. And by the end of this arc, he's going to be convinced that Luffy is going to be Pirate King, the one who will get him there. He's going to know he must follow Luffy, and he has to follow Luffy with or without his crew if he wants to achieve his dream. Luffy and Law are going to continue their story together without a doubt. That's just what the narrative demands. I don't think anyone can deny that after chapters 996 and 1000. So let's leave established facts and get into theory territory for just a second. Law and his crew are going to realize that Luffy and co are going to be facing down the entire world, the world government and 2 more emperors to get to where Luffy and Law want to be. But they will realize that if they continue to follow Law, that is Law's crew, they will not survive the upcoming battles. And you know what? Law will not be okay with risking their lives like that. So, in the end, they will have to go their separate ways. Like I said in my last video, there is a lot they have in common with the Frankie family. So, when this comes to pass, what happens to them? Well, looking back on past characters who have separated from the Straw Hats, we never really know what becomes of these people until we see them in a cover story. Maybe Law's crew will get one, or maybe we'll see them helping to rebuild Zhao in a Decks of the New World kind of cover story. I know the idea of leaving them behind stings because Bepo is such an absolute delight, but honestly, how many lines has the only remotely interesting member of Law's crew even gotten in the story? I hate to say it, but he's not as big of a deal as we pretend he is. Fourthly and finally, a lot of people have noticed, myself included, that Law's attitude toward Luffy isn't exactly subservient. He doesn't really do what Luffy tells him most of the time, or at least he didn't before that very notable moment in chapter 1000. Much like the nickname thing though, this can change easily. However, unlike the nickname thing, this will need to change. Law will need to see Luffy as the future Pirate King. Once again, this arc really seems like it is building towards that, at least by what we saw in the last chapter. So there you have it. Some of the arguments against Law joining were far from valid, but some of them could threaten his chances. The upcoming battle and its aftermath will most certainly resolve any of these questions though that we have in our mind about if Law can join, so I will be watching them very carefully. In other words, I will be giving them exactly the amount of attention I always give the chapters. So despite the arguments against him, have I been swayed against the concept of Law joining the crew? No, Law will join Luffy's crew. Don't believe me? Well, just keep an eye out in the upcoming chapters for Luffy calling Law by his name, Chopper proving to be the bestest doctor, Zoro proving to be the strongest boy, and Law telling Kaido that Luffy will be Pirate King. I would say to look out for Law's crew, but at this point, they seem to have the narrative significance of Smoothie, so...
Yo!
Guy go! Hey there!
Don't leave without subbing.
Hey there!
Don't leave without liking.
Hey there!
Don't forget to comment. Hit the bell, hit the bell, hit the bell.